Welcome back to the Abundant Practice Podcast. I'm your host, Allison Pereira, and I'm excited to be here with a friend who's been here multiple times, Linzy Bonham of MoneyNutsAndBolts.com. Today, Linzy and I are going to be talking about money shame, and I'm psyched to have you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me back. I am flattered to have been here. I think this is my fourth time.
Something like it. Yeah,
Something
I
like
love
that. Yeah, sounds right.
that. Yeah, well, money shame uh, has always been a thing working with
Mhm.
therapists. The more I talk about it on social media, the more hateful comments I get, the more impassioned pleas I get from people of
Mhm.
like, but how do I stop having
Mhm.
shame around making money? So
Mhm.
it's always very divisive. I'm excited to have you talking with us about this. You have been like our
Mhm.
budgeting queen. You have
Yes.
been like how to manage your money in private practice, but you don't have a whole lot of manage or a lot of money to manage in private practice if you're full of shame about it. So,
True story. Yes. And
yeah.
something that I do reflect to my students is like money management is harder and a lot less fun when you don't have a lot of money to manage.
Hmm.
And that is where we end up when we are mired in kind of like when we have a fraught relationship with money, when we're mired
Yeah,
in shame and doubt about if we even deserve to be making money in the first place.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, where should we start today in talking about this very loaded subject?
Yes. I mean, like something that I think about is two parts to money shame. Cause like the way that I work with finances and money is I do think about it as kind of two overlapping topics that when
Hmm.
we talk about money shame, we're kind of talking about both things at once. So it's nice to pull them apart a little bit. One is about the stuff you're talking about, which is money, period. Right? Just the
Hmm.
concept of money, the fact that money exists, the fact that like as business owners, we need to make money to be humans in the world and pay our mortgages, right? And like what beliefs we have about money, right? Like,
Hmm.
do we deserve to make money? Is it good to make money? Is it okay that money exists? Right? Is it okay for us to have money if other people don't have money? So there's that whole part of money of just like money, period. Like I'm good because, or sorry, I'm bad because I have money. I'm bad because I don't have money. Right. So there's
Hmm.
that whole constellation of just like our beliefs about money in general. Then there's another overlapping constellations of beliefs and feelings around money, which is like our ability to manage it, right? And that's the
Hmm.
finances part of money. I remember when I first
Hmm.
started doing this work years ago, I was like, I will never use the word finances. It's like too scary to people. But now I've realized like, no, that's actually like a separate piece. And that is what I do. And that is what I teach is like the how to actually do money. And we end up with shame about that too. Like we end up with shame of like, I'm making money, but I don't know where it is. I have none in my bank account. Like, what am I doing? I'm messing up. That
Hmm.
brings on shame, right? Or like I'm overspending my money and I don't know how to stop, or I haven't saved enough for taxes. And now I'm in this like, trouble spiral with the IRS or the CRA. So that also brings up money shame, but that's a like whole other way to be ashamed about money. So really what I'm saying, Allison, is there's just endless opportunities for us to be ashamed and
Wonderful.
troubled in our relationship with money. So good news. Good news.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think about that like it's normal,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
I don't have neutral people in my DMs when I talk about money. I don't have
Mm,
neutral people in my comments when I
yes.
talk about money.
Yes. Yes.
The people who are like gung ho and they're like, absolutely, these are people I know who have already done money work.
Yes. Yes.
And there is a lot of money work to be done.
It is the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. Like it is more normal to be like stressed and anxious, ashamed, fraught, angry about money than not. Like neutral
Hmm.
is actually a place that it takes work for people to
Hmm.
get to, right? And like the work that I do with folks and the work that you do with folks, we don't want them to just get to neutral. We want them to get to positive, joyful, empowered, right? But like it is normal that we start in a place of difficult feelings around money, and there's so many reasons for that. The first one is even if you're not a therapist, we just don't get financial education. Like we
Right.
don't get taught to really think about what does money mean to you? How do your values intersect with money? So like that first constellation of stuff we were talking about of like what money means,
Hmm.
we don't get any education around that in either like the public system, the university college system, or in our professional training.
Hmm.
But we also don't get taught how to manage it. So it's like even though inevitably all of us will have to have bank accounts, we'll have to make the decision to buy a house or not, we'll have debt that we have to manage, even though 100% of people will end up in that boat. We don't actually get effective financial education if we get any financial education at all at any stage of schooling. So it's like we are
Right.
basically set up to fail at this certain
Hmm.
area of our life that we cannot avoid.
Right.
which is it's a real setup, let me tell you. So
Yeah.
if you feel bad about money and you think it's about you, it's not about you. This is like a
Mhm.
systemic failing. If I wanted to be conspiratorial, I would say that it's done on purpose. But if I want to be gracious, I'm just going to say it's a huge blind spot in our education system that negatively impacts all of us.
Mhm. And then I think if you go to any of the graduate programs for counseling, there's a good likelihood you're going to be imbued with new levels of money shame that you've never experienced before that are now related to the work that you do and whether or not you're a good therapist.
100%. And like a theory that I have that I'm feeling like I'm getting confirmation of it every time I ask a group of people about it is I have a theory that the vast majority of therapists were helpers and basically were little baby therapists long before they were ever paid to be therapists.
Oh, yeah.
So already we're caretakers. We're the type of people
Mhm.
who were the peacemakers in our family. We're the type of person who was like at the party off in the corner talking to somebody about the hard time they're having with their family instead of having fun. That was me. I was the
Mhm.
sober one in the corner while everybody else was like, I don't know, doing the Macarena or whatever we were doing back then. And
Mhm.
so already we are caregivers. Already we're self-sacrificing. Already we take on a huge amount of responsibility for systemic issues and failings and like suffering of people who we do not know. We're already deeply troubled by all of these things. And then you put us through an education system that's like, don't think about money. I'm sorry. You shouldn't be in this for the money. Think
Mhm.
about helping other people. And a system where in many, many modalities or in many certifications and diplomas and degrees, you have to work for free for extended
Right.
periods of time, which teaches you this work is worth literally $0. In fact, you're paying to do this work because you were going to school and paying fees to go off and do this work.
Mhm.
So it's just so deeply ingrained in us. And I think that that hits on the natural troubling we already had around money. And it just
Mhm.
deepens it so much more of like, don't even talk about money. You're here to
Yeah.
help people. The world is troubled and it's your job to fix it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Not, yeah.
And then we get hit by the other therapist when we're working
Yes.
through it. The
Yes.
other
Yes.
therapist will jump on us.
100%. Yes. Like
Yeah.
there is this policing that happens internally. It makes me think about the book The Second Sex by Simone de
Mhm.
Beauvoir
I
that
remember
I
it.
read back in university days, married to Jean-Paul Sartre, cool couple. And she talked about how mothers will do cruel things to their daughters because cruel things were done to them. And they're
Mhm.
like, this is what it means to be a woman. I don't care that you're uncomfortable. I don't care that these tights are scratchy. I don't care that you feel bad about your body. I had to go through this. This is what it means to be a woman. I'm going to put you through this. And this is what we
Uh-huh.
do to each other as therapists. We're like,
Yep.
no, no, no. Therapy is suffering. Yeah, you're supposed to make, $30 or $40,000 a year for your first 10 years. Or yeah, you're supposed to work for a terrible nonprofit that eats your soul for the amount of time until your loans can be forgiven. That is like, that is what we do. And if somebody tries to break that mold and say anything that challenges that status quo, there is a whole bunch of folks who will just like try to police them back into place. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, we just enforce our own our own suffering. Being a
Hmm.
therapist is suffering. And if you're not suffering or if you're thinking about maybe having a good time, there's lots of folks who will step up to police you back into your place.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I'll see this dynamic where there will be people who are like, okay, like, yes, you need to pay your bills. That's fine.
Hmm.
But do you need to make $200,000?
Hmm. Yeah.
They'll be like, this is just greedy. And I'm
Yes.
like, well, are you putting away for retirement?
Yeah.
Are you paying off your student
Yeah.
loans? Are
Yes.
you taking vacations? Because you're like allowed to take
Yeah.
vacations and
You
still
look
be a good
tired.
therapist.
You look tired. Yeah.
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 Like how much, and in some areas, $200,000 is not enough to do that and pay your taxes and
Oh
pay
my
your
gosh, no.
overhead.
If you live
In
in
some
San
areas,
Francisco, forget
oh
it.
yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing is like we have these points and it's different for all of us of like what is that line where it's okay to make this much or you're allowed to have these things or you're allowed to want these things but
Mhm.
this is greedy. And if you polled 100 therapists they would all have 100 different answers,
Right.
right? Because it's just some sort of probably arbitrary number that we came up with based on like this person who I knew was a good person and they made 150 but this guy was an asshole and he made 300,000, so like
Mhm.
definitely that's what turns you into a jerk because when you make 300,000 like it's probably something like that, arbitrary, but we
Right.
all have those little beliefs of like where we feel comfortable, like, oh, I'm allowed to make this much, but that much is too much. And we
Mhm.
put that on other people. And
Right.
it's good to like stop and reflect, being curious. I was a trauma
Mhm.
therapist by training. So curiosity is still one of my favorite tools. Be curious about like where your particular story comes from. Like, why would it be okay for somebody to make 100,000, but not 150? Like, what do you think the
Right.
difference is there? Like, what are the assumptions you're making about the cost of their life, their health situation, their dependents, the city that they live in, right? Because what it takes for me to be well, living in Guelph, Ontario, where I live, which is a city of 120,000 people, the amount of money it takes me to thrive and be well is 50% or less of what it would take for me to have the same life in San Francisco. Like, you just
Hmm.
cannot compare these
Yeah.
different geographic situations as though you're talking about the same money, because money just does totally different things depending on your living situation, even just geography as a starting place.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And also values, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
I think if I were to say, well, yeah, it's $10,000 a month for somebody's mom to be in memory care,
Yes.
people would be like, oh, well, that's a really noble way to spend the money. I can understand why you would need to charge
Yes.
that much. But that doesn't
Yes.
mean that therapist is advertising that that's what's going on for
No.
them.
No, of course
Right.
not. Yes.
And if the same therapist, mom's not in memory care, like doing fine, were
Hmm.
to buy a Maserati with that money,
Hmm.
like that's okay.
Hmm.
It's okay. It's okay for them
Hmm.
to have different values for you with their money.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean they're taking advantage of their clients who willingly
Hmm.
said, yes, I would love to keep working with you, even though you raised your rate.
Yes.
Or, yes, I'm signing on full well knowing what you charge, and I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
And we also don't know where people are donating. And that is like one of my biggest things.
Yes.
It makes the least amount of sense to make a difference in the world with the hours of our life.
Mm. Hmm.
It makes
Hmm.
so much more sense for my money to combine with your money, to
Yeah.
combine with a grant
Yes.
and fund multiple positions all year
Yes.
long that can see
Yes.
like entire caseloads full of
Yes.
clients
Yes.
that provide accessibility.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think there's that strategic impact piece. And when we get out of good, bad, that there's good people and bad people, and if you cross a certain line, you become a bad person, then we can start to think strategically about money. Like, where can this money have the greatest impact? Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm not going to be able to run a program for folks with intellectual disabilities that like gives them empowerment and connection. Like, I can't do that as a person, but I can
Mm-hmm.
donate to an organization that's so good at that, right?
Yeah.
And that like has nailed that and is like doing amazing things already, and I can just like add fuel to their fire, through
Mm-hmm.
my dollars. So yeah, there is that piece. And I think that part of it, Allison, is like, if we go back to the piece about being a therapist, is like, we are so conditioned to think that all that we have to give is our emotional energy,
Huh,
and that is our
say that
most
again.
we are so conditioned to only see our value as our emotional energy and our emotional contribution, right?
Mhm.
That I think it really challenges us to think like, hey, I can exchange this amazing gift that I have to help people get clarity with ADHD, like fix problems with their marriage, heal childhood trauma and have incredible lives that they never could have imagined. I can take those talents and gifts and I can turn that into money that has this totally different type of impact that has nothing to do with my emotional energy or even with my talents and skills, and can have
Mhm.
this totally different type of impact in the world. And I actually don't have to be personally responsible for making that happen. It's
Yes.
not actually my responsibility to fix the world with every ounce of my energy every single day.
Yes.
Yeah. But it really goes against our martyr conditioning,
It
right?
does.
Because
It does.
what if I'm doing the work that I love? What if I've found a fee that makes sense for me, which might be very different than your fee? And I'm working an amount of hours that's actually sustainable and I'm taking vacation and I'm also having that positive impact on the world, then I might actually be enjoying myself,
Oh God, don't do that.
right? And am I allowed to do that? Right? Like, there really are these deep, deep beliefs here that as therapists we have to unpack around our own deserving to be well, our deservingness of joy and connection and wonder, right? And all these things that we want for our clients, that like, you can also have those things and you can have an incredible impact on the world, and it's not like an either or
Hmm.
scenario, right? But I think for many of us, because we were caretakers from the beginning, because probably there was some conditioning in our family and some trauma that has led us to believe that it's not okay ultimately to enjoy life. We have to stop and unpack that work rather than
Hmm.
policing other folks and telling them what is okay and not okay, in
Yeah.
any person's individual life.
Hmm. Yeah. And that policing that happens, it's interesting because it's shrouded in the accessibility police is what I call
Hmm.
them. Like it's
Yeah.
shrouded in like,
Yes.
you were doing this wrong.
Yeah.
because you're not seeing everybody, which
Yes.
none of us can see everybody,
No.
like impossible. Um, I think it's most of the time just hiding jealousy or
Mm-hmm.
their own self-worth stuff that's coming up for them. It's a defense.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah.
Um, they just haven't done the work yet.
Yes.
And I think like it is, I truly believe in my soul. Every single private pay therapist needs to have amazing referrals for the
Mm-hmm.
people that call them that cannot afford them. I think it is our
Yep.
job.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
as long as we have great referrals that we would send our friends and family to
Yeah.
that take insurance or have low sliding scale fees or just take great care of people with different financial needs,
Mm-hmm.
um, then we're solid because
Yeah.
there isn't anybody who can see everybody that calls them.
No,
And if we
absolutely
put that on
not.
ourselves or each other, then we're screwed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, I have a couple thoughts that are like spinning off of that because I'm thinking about my own preoccupation right now with houselessness in my
Hmm.
community. It is
Hmm.
like exploding in Guelph,
Hmm.
Ontario. So like the area by the river where I used to just go for little walks, I would send video messages with Tiffany McLean. I would go for a walk,
Hmm.
send video messages with my, business friends and feel like do like just kind of wandering. Now I have to watch for needles. There are like folks living in tents. There's like wet sleeping bags. Like the other day I was there and I was like, if this person was here, I would offer to wash and dry their sleeping bag. Like, oh my God, where are they
Hmm.
going to sleep tonight? So there's this huge social issue that I actually can't fix with my talents, right?
Hmm.
But I can use the money that I've generated through my talents over here to put money towards like the structured encampment project that is happening in my community, right? But
Hmm.
it's like I don't actually have to personally fix the houselessness program. Like I don't personally have to fix the houselessness project or problem. It's not a project that I'm actually skilled in, but I
Hmm.
can like do this thing that I love over here and still contribute to these issues that's actually not my zone. And it makes me think about giving ourselves permission to have an impact on areas outside of our zone and not just live in our zone. And by our zone, I mean like when we're therapists, just a theory, we often go into certain areas of clinical specialty because they have personal significance to us.
Hmm.
And something that it thinks about is like we do end up sometimes stuck in like a trauma bubble, right?
Yeah.
Where we think that our whole life should be about this issue because now we're giving ourselves away over and over to clients too many hours a week because
Hmm.
we're not valuing that work. And we're almost just trapping ourselves in this place where we're just living that issue over and over and over, whatever that is, whether it's eating disorders or childhood sexual abuse or perinatal depression, pregnancy loss, like we are stuck in that place. And we think that that's a good thing to do is to like
Hmm.
live in the pain.
Right.
And it's a big move to actually say, I'm only going to be there in this really sustainable way, or maybe I'm not even going to be there anymore in that space. And I'm going to use these talents that I have and put my money towards other things. That's a really big move where you're basically saying that you deserve to be happy and well.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's a scary move for us to make when we've been self sacrificing and connected to whatever painful issue it is that we specialize
Mhm.
in maybe
Yeah.
our whole lives. So there's
Right.
there's something there that I'm kind of thinking about like identity and like what we think we deserve and what is comfortable versus like what is actually fulfilling. That
Hmm.
therapy can really reinforce if we're not
Right.
critical about if we're actually enjoying the work that we're doing anymore.
Right. Because therapists do, as a group of people, over identify with their jobs.
Uh-huh.
It's
100%.
rough. And
Yes.
I
Yes.
think that part of that also happens for all the reasons you named, but also because of that indoctrination in grad school
Hmm.
of like, there was this vibe of like, you will be poor, but you will be better.
Yes, yes. It's very like it's got a kind of got like a monastery vibe to it,
Yeah.
of like self-sacrifice, but like pure and good. Yeah, and it's really important to unpack those beliefs. Like, is that actually what you want your life to look like?
Right.
Something
Not
that I think
me.
about and talk about is like, if this is your one and only human life, like, is this how you want to do it?
Hmm.
Because yeah, there is this really strong martyr narrative. And then again, as we said earlier, we shame police other people around us
Hmm.
um, into basically designing a miserable life for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's no bueno, and we shouldn't do it.
Yeah. Against.
Yeah,
Against.
against. Do not endorse. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So as folks are looking to start to move through and shift through shame, like the first step that I found that really makes an impact is what we're starting to talk about here, which is like start to unpack, like look at your own stories. Like, what do you believe about money? And is that what you actually want to believe? Like, do you want to believe that if somebody has $200,000 a year, they're a bad person? right? Is that what you want to carry through the world? And like, why do you believe that? Where did you learn
Mhm.
that? Is that from like your Uncle Matt? You know, because he wasn't
Damn
very
it.
nice. Is Uncle
Uh-huh.
Matt representative of everybody? It's like starting to be open to reframing those stories, because often our money stories are so unconscious, and they're running not only, Allison, like our choices around our fees and our schedule and our relationship with clients and enforcing policies and like that part of the money relationship, but they're also running how we manage our money. Like, are we feeling clear and in control? Are we setting enough aside for taxes? Are we spending on things that bring joy, but also saving for our future? All
Mhm.
of those things are impacted by the stories that we're running in our brains. And if you don't know your stories, and if you can't name your stories, and if you don't have ownership of like, this story I actually really like, I really love this value that my family or my church or my community passed on to me, and that's really important to me. But this one, I'm going to let go.
Mhm.
If you're not doing that work, then you are just being run by usually somebody else's story,
Yeah.
usually something you've inherited from somebody else, your education system, stories about you and who you are that are external to your community, whatever that is. Right. So, like, that's the first thing, is starting to open up your mind to the idea that maybe you can let some of these things go. And what would it look like if you let some of these things go? Right? Because
Mhm.
like we often are living them without realizing it, and we're pushing them on other people. But sometimes when we stop to think about it, we're like, that literally makes no sense.
Right.
Sometimes it's as simple as just being like, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. That will allow us to create that opening to start to think about what we want to believe
Mhm.
instead. It's like absolutely essential to being able to do, I think, any work around money, like practical work around how your practice is run, but also work around managing money and making it go where you want to go. Like, stories are first, always.
Yeah, I love that. And there's so much juicy stuff in there too, if you're willing to like look at it. And it's
Yes.
okay if you're like, okay, I'm not ready to touch that.
Yeah.
I'm aware it is there. And
Yes.
that awareness can even create
Yeah.
some openness and some change even before the hard work of working through it.
100%. And that awareness too can make you stop and pause before you put your stories on other people, right?
Hmm.
Put your stories on your clients about what they can afford or what your role should be and their role should be in your relationship, or put that on your colleagues and your friends, right?
Hmm.
Like that opening. And sometimes, frankly, those stories, Allison, are things you have to bring to therapy. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's straight up trauma. Like, I mean, money
Hmm.
connects to everything. It connects to security, safety, self-worth, right? Like our values, what do we think should be happening in the world? What do we think a human life is supposed to look like? Like, it's so deep that some of those
Hmm.
things, just as you start to think about them, they'll shift and open and loosen. And other things you're going to be like, whoa, that is therapy stuff. And I'm
Yeah.
going back to therapy or bringing this to therapy next week, because some of it is really deep and does actually warrant you getting, really skilled support to help you through it.
Yeah. And I think the other therapists in your communities, whether they're online communities, whether they're in life communities,
Mhm.
other therapists who are working on this can be so helpful to be around
Yes.
because they're not
Yes.
going to shame you. Like I know in your
Yes.
groups and in my groups, people can be like,
Yeah.
I, I made this much money
Yeah.
and there's no one else I can say this out loud to, but I'm
Yes.
like really excited that I
Yes.
made this money.
Yes.
And everybody's like, hell yeah, you made all this money. And
Yes.
there's support and love for knowing the work that went into that. And like the emotional labor of being okay with making that money and all of that,
Mhm.
it isn't going to go over so well in like the average free Facebook group.
Yes.
So, mhm,
Yes. Yeah, like, I think one of my biggest lessons in business and in life, I'd say in the last 10 years, is be really mindful of who is around you,
mhm,
right? Which also means be discerning, which also means sometimes making hard decisions and letting certain relationships drift or go, that you realize, like, oh, wow, whenever I'm around this person, I feel bad about myself and I feel small. And I notice I don't want to talk about my success, because then they spiral into talking about what's bad about their life, or I feel judged by them, right? Like, there
mhm,
have been many people in my life that over time have had to be like, I loved you and there was a time and a place, but you're actually stopping me from like being okay in my life at this point. You're running active interference.
uh-huh,
And it's time to drift, or it's time to go, right? And so being in those communities of like-minded folks who can celebrate you, right? Who are
mhm,
also learning and doing hard things and coming in and being like, hey, I was going to talk to my client about raising my fee, but instead we talked about the weather. I
uh-huh.
didn't do it. Like, but also people who I think might be even challenged by where you're at, but they can stop and reflect on it themselves and own,
Right.
that's interesting. When you say that, this comes up for me. So I went away and journaled on it and I brought it to my therapy, or I thought about it during yoga, and I shifted to this place. Like, folks who are taking responsibility for their own beliefs rather than
Hmm.
putting it on you is invaluable, especially if, like many folks who I work with, you are the primary earner in your family or you're a solo earner, like frankly, you don't have time to mess around,
Right, right.
with being shamed for the next 20 years. And then at 65, be like, shit, now I've got to do something because this isn't
Hmm.
working, right? Like you need to be around people who are going to like lift you up and help you create the version of your practice and your life that you need now. That is
Hmm.
imperative for us to be able to make the moves that we need to make to be well. Because there's a lot that we have to uncondition, get out of our brains and take on new positive ideas. That takes a lot of work. And you need to have people around you who are going to be supporting you and doing that work.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Lindsay, thank you for being one of those people with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Likewise, likewise.
Yeah. So moneynutsandbolts.com, y'all look up Lindsay, get to know everything she offers because she's working with people on both levels
Yes,
and you need both levels.
you do. Yeah. Yeah,
So,
we do. We do the feelings and we do the practical stuff. I have a new podcast series on my podcast called Feelings and Finances. And I'm like, that really
uh-huh.
kind of captures it. It's like we do the mindset and the connection and the what does that mean? And then also the like spreadsheets, taxes, strategy. You need both of those things, especially when you're, feelings people like we are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yay. Well, thank you so much. I'll see you soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Allison.